I belong to the group of people who think that the Doha round is dead and has been dead for quite some time, and there's not going to be any way to recover it. But that doesn't mean that the World Trade Organization is dead. It simply means that we need to find ways to recover or to rekindle a new sort of leadership structure for the World Trade Organization. And when you look around the world, you can only see two economies in the world which has the requisite institutional, economic and political capacity to lead an organization like that, and that's going to be the European Union and the United States. My second point is that too many people tend to look at trade policy in a very black and white, Manichaean type of view, where you see multilateralism versus bilateralism. That is also a very unhistoric view, because if you want to understand what has happened in the post-world economic arena, you will see that bilateral initiatives, multilateral initiatives, unilateral initiatives, they have coexisted together. Sometimes they have been in opposition to each other, but quite often they have reinforced each other. And that's also how I look at a new sort of transatlantic economic strategy. Apart from the generating the sort of bilateral gains that is going to occur if you take away barriers to trade and investments between each other. In addition to that, you also need to take much more of a global leadership perspective and use this sort of transatlantic axis to lead the world towards new type of trade agreements, which is going to include many more countries than the EU and the United States. And if you can do that, I think you have an enormous capacity to generate economic growth, both for Europe, both for the United States, and for the rest of the world. I think whatever sort of agreement that you're going to do between the EU and the United States, agriculture has to be there, because you can't really carve out one sector and believe that you can generate the sort of political support you need in order to get these through. So it has to be dealt with. And it has been, at least on the American side, been the perception for quite some time that, within quotation marks, Europeans are never going to be serious about reforming its agriculture policy. So that's why there's no idea at all to start these sort of negotiations with them. I think that perception has changed. And it has changed for a couple of reasons. The first one is that European agriculture policy has changed in the past 10 years, and the rise of commodity prices itself has rehashed European agriculture support to such a degree that there are much fewer farmers that are dependent on the sort of traditional protection that the CAP offered. The second thing is that very few tariff lines or subsidies given in Europe are given in order to protect European farmers from American competition. They are there to protect competition from other parts of the world. So there are quite few elements which is going to clog up any sort of transatlantic ambition here to free it up. My last point is that the most sensitive issues in agriculture relations between the two, they are not about tariffs, they are not about subsidies, but they are about non-tariff barriers, and in particular regulations that deals with GMOs and that sort of stuff. And I think it's going to be quite an uphill task to find a solution to these differences, at least to all differences on these issues in a free trade agreement negotiation. I think you can deal with parts of the issues, but you also need to be aware that everything cannot be done in one sweep. So it's much better to set up some sort of a framework for continue to work on these issues in future. This is also what they've been doing in the past, and some of these issues they have been managed to solve them quite remarkably well. So I'm not very concerned about agriculture itself. Both sides, Europe and the United States, they've been used to look on themselves as being the leading exporters of global order. And that could be commercial order, but could also be political, strategic order. They are now facing competition on that score, and that competition is only going to be reinforced in the next decades. So there isn't that much time to play for. If these both the United States and Europe wants to, if they feel that they have much more in common with each other than they have with others, and they want to use that as a springboard for setting standards, various sorts of standards for how we're going to behave in the world in future, then now it's the time to do it, because 10 years from now, that opportunity is not going to have the same payoff.